Hi, hello everybody. Welcome back to another Men's Divorce Podcast Live. My name is Bill Phelan. I am a litigation partner at the domestic relations law firm of Cordell Cordell. I'm out of our Philadelphia, Pennsylvania office. This month, we have a panel of Cordell divorce attorneys who will answer your questions live and to discuss the divorce of this month. We have Reese Witherspoon and Jim Toth. Certainly a lot to talk about there. Obviously, most people know Reese Witherspoon very well. Her work in movies and TV shows from The Morning Show on Apple TV. If you have children, you probably know her as Rosita the Pig in Sing and Sing 2. June Carter, Walk the Line. Elle Woods, obviously, in Legally Blonde. For those of a more cult following in the movie, in the cinematic world, you also probably recognize her as Evelyn Williams alongside of Christian Bale in American Psycho. A great catalog repertoire of movies that we'll touch on in a moment here. First, a little bit about the firm. Cordell Cordell is one of the world's largest domestic litigation firms of its kind, advocating for fathers and men before, during, and after divorce. With over 30 years of experience in all facets of family law, we are a partner that men can count on. So up front, please be sure to submit your questions in the chat box on YouTube or Facebook Live. We'll certainly try to get to all of those questions through the course of our event here today. Men's Divorce Podcast Live is a special monthly series hosted by the firm. If you would like to listen to more topics regarding divorce on family law, be sure to subscribe to the Cordell Cordell YouTube channel, and you could click or visit the links below on your screen to gain access not only just to our current running series of celebrity divorces, but we have podcasts on a whole variety of topics pertaining to divorce, custody, support, domestic violence issues that pertain to many people, whether we're talking about settlement or going to the courthouse with litigation. So be sure to check those all out. One disclaimer up front: an attorney-client relationship is not being established today through this webinar. We encourage you to contact our office directly if you are seeking legal advice, and we'd be certainly happy to set you up through a consult. We have virtual consultations, and you can see phone number 866-DAS-LAW, CordellCordell.com if you do want to seek legal consultation to obtain legal advice. So I want to get to our esteemed panel today. Up front, we have first Deanna Potter. She is a lead litigator out of our Marietta, Georgia office. Welcome, Deanna.
Thank you. As William said, my name is Deanna Potter. I'm a lead litigator. I work in the Cordell's Marietta office, which is a suburb of Atlanta. I have been practicing for 16 years almost. I have been handling family law issues in some way, shape, or form for almost my entire career, and have been handling family law exclusively since 2015.
All right. Thank you, Deanna. Now, our next introduction is going to be with Presley Lee. She is a litigation attorney out of our Jacksonville, Florida office. Presley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Presley Lee. As indicated, I am a litigation attorney in our Jacksonville, Florida office. Jacksonville, Florida is located in Northeast Florida, really close to the state of Georgia. I have been practicing marital and family law since 2019, and I have been with Cordell Cordell since October of 2020, and I'm happy to be here this evening.
All right, fantastic. So before we jump into some details about Reese and Jim, first we're going to take a quick commercial break here for our sponsors. Please stay tuned. Right, and we're back. So, as we said at the top, we're talking about Reese Witherspoon and her former spouse, Jim Toth. So, Reese Witherspoon, we went through her CV a few moments ago. Jim Toth, as most people may or may not know, is a Hollywood agent. The two of them met in shortly after Reese split with her then significant other, Jake Gyllenhaal, another Hollywood star. In March of that year, Witherspoon introduced her friends to Mr. Toth, where she ended up consulting with their friends and ended up introducing them to her children from a previous relationship. And they were adults at that time, I believe, Ava and Deacon. In April of 2010, Witherspoon introduced some of her other celebrity friends to Mr. Toth: Tobey Maguire, Molly Sims, Jason Bateman, Jennifer Gardner. After that, Witherspoon and Toth announced their engagement in December of 2010, so just a few short months after they first met. And then they were married in March of 2011 in a backyard ceremony at Witherspoon's ranch in California. Now, in March of 2012, they had another development when Witherspoon and Toth announced that they were expecting their baby and later welcomed their son in September of 2012, Tennessee. Witherspoon's career also changed during later parts of their relationship. As most people may know, she started out as an actress, but then she began moving on to producing movies, executive producing movies, and also crediting her husband for giving her the inspiration to do so. In March of 2021, they celebrated 10 years of marriage. However, a few days before their 12th wedding anniversary in March of 2023, both Witherspoon and Toth mutually announced to the world that they were divorcing due to that term we hear ever so often in celebrity divorces: irreconcilable differences. So 4 months after the two of them filed for divorce, they, from what we understand, a settlement was reached in which both parties agreed upon joint custody of the child, Tennessee, and they also released some information, or information was somehow released, where their personal items were divided to their mutual satisfaction. I say it's limited because the other piece of information released was that is that they had a non-disclosure agreement as part of the resolution of their divorce. Also, another important feature of their divorce is they did have a prenuptial agreement, which, from what I understand, has not been made public for obvious reasons. But also, they some of the other terms that did come to public light was that there was no alimony as part of this divorce, and each ended up paying their own share of fees and costs associated with finalizing their divorce. So we see here some aspects that are fairly common in divorces, no matter what state you're in, whether it's California, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, where I'm at, or Georgia or Florida, where our panelists are at. You typically see that there can be alimony, there may not be alimony. A lot of cases you see the litigants end up paying their own way to finalize it, whether it's by agreement as you see here with Witherspoon and Toth, or if you unfortunately may have to go to court to litigate it and have a judge figure out what you're going to do with custody, what you're going to do with marital property, what you're going to do if the case warrants with alimony. So let's bring the group in here. Let's take a look at some of the features of this divorce and talk about, what we see in our own jurisdictions. So Deanna, I'm going to throw it first to you on custody. So in this case, we had the parties agreeing to joint custody as well as no child support. So when you have a custody case come to your office, come in front of you, what are you looking at as far as details and the elements and factors with regard to custody? And to jump a little bit ahead, what might be a good case where you're looking at joint custody for that type of situation?
Okay. Yeah. So when I'm talking about custody with my clients, I always talk about it like a brick wall. Custody is really about putting your facts together to build your case. And, we want to build as strong of a case as we possibly can. So oftentimes the court will look at facts like, who is the parent who is a majority of the time taking the children, to and from doctor's appointments, dealing with school issues, how involved are they in extracurricular activities? Can they support the children work schedule? Having a flexible work schedule can be very helpful, when you are dealing with a custody issue, because obviously if you work long hours, versus somebody who, might work the same hours that the children are in school. So you look at all of these different facts to argue your case and to put your case together. With respect to a joint physical custody, 50-50 custody arrangement, again, we're looking at, you want to make sure that you are as involved as you possibly can be with the children, with school activities, doctor's appointments, things like that. And we are seeing that more and more these days. Another thing that the court is going to take into consideration, especially with a 50-50 joint physical arrangement, is, how close do the parties live to each other? Because, God knows, the traffic in Atlanta is horrible. If the parties live on opposite sides of town, even if the parties get along well, and it's a really amicable situation, just practically speaking, you don't want the kids getting up at 4:00 in the morning one week because, you have to get them to school on the other side of town. So living close together, living close to the children's school, all those things can come into play. And I think definitely play a role, especially in a 50-50 custody arrangement.
All right. Good. Presley, I'm going to stick with custody, throw it over to you, throw it across the Florida-Georgia line, see what your take is on what you're looking for when a potential client walks in through your office doors for joint custody. And then I'm also going to ask you to address another interesting factor that we see in the Witherspoon-Toth situation, and that is Reese Witherspoon had two other children. Now they're now adult children, but sometimes we see this in custody cases where you have the modern family. You have half siblings coming into play, or step siblings. You basically have children from another marriage or children from another relationship. How does that play into a parent's request for custodial rights in Florida?
So Florida is a very unique state as it relates to the concept of custody. We don't necessarily call it custody in Florida. We have what's called parental responsibility, which is who is making the decisions on behalf of the child. And then we have the concept of time sharing, which is who is the child spending time with. And that's really where it comes down to the 50-50 factor. Now, in July of 2023, Florida legislature passed a law that indicated that 50-50 is now the presumption, which is a fantastic thing for fathers in the state of Florida, and husbands who want that time with their children. So the presumption now is we're starting out at 50-50, and then we're looking at what Florida considers to be the best interest factors for the children or whether it's a child or children. There are factors that the court breaks down, kind of like Deanna indicated that they do in Georgia. The length of time it's going to take to travel between the two households, who's spending time with the children, who's customarily done tasks for the children with their routine, doctor's appointments, and things like that. Now, as it's relating to other children, you have to be able to make sure that you're meeting your obligations to them as well. Now, if they're adult children, that's not something Florida's really going to consider unless we're looking into who's going to be caring for the child in the event that the parent can't. It's always nice to have somebody that you can call, and that can be, an extra caretaker in the event that you need that additional assistance. But as far as another parenting plan is concerned, it's just making sure that you can meet your rights and obligations under both established plans.
And I'll just add too, with regards to other children and step siblings, that is another factor that will be looked at in Georgia. What is that child's relationship with the half siblings or step siblings? So that is something that can definitely come into play as well.
No, I completely agree. We look at that as well when we're looking at the nature and relationship and involvement with additional family members. That's something that the court absolutely takes into consideration.
Yeah, and the same thing here for Pennsylvania's 2 cents is we have 16 custody factors that we look at, that the judge is required to look at more specifically. And one of them is not just siblings, step siblings, half siblings, but all immediate relatives, and the relationship of the child to immediate relatives. So you could talk about grandparents, aunts and uncles as well. And if they're nearby and there's a strong relationship there, that's definitely something that you want to bring to the attention of your attorney as a factor, or a fact that might help you in your quest for joint custody or whatever type of custody you're looking at. So, okay, great. I think definitely a lot to consider here on the custody front. Let's switch gears a little bit, and we'll talk about the more of the divorce features here. So, in the Witherspoon Toth situation, each spouse then agreed to keep their own personal belongings. So I'd like to throw it open to our panel here and talk about what you look for in a new case that comes into you for divorce when a potential client or a new client, they want to look at a specific asset that they want at the end of the day. It might be an antique, a coin collection. It might be keeping more of my retirement account because, I need that when I hit 65. How do you sort of size up the marital state and try and, help your client with the specific goal of wanting more of one asset, maybe even at the expense of another?
I can take it from here.
Sure.
In the state of Florida, we have what's called equitable distribution. We can also plea for unequal distribution in the event that a party is looking for a settlement or an outcome where they're going to get something greater than what would be considered equal. At the outset of every Florida family law case, we engage in what's called mandatory disclosure, which is essentially a fancy term for giving each party full, fair, and frank financial discovery, where you're going through bank statements, assets, retirement, if there's a business involved, and really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what is in the marital pot. What are we trying to divide, and making sure that we're properly identifying each of those assets and those liabilities. In all of my cases, I generally make a spreadsheet for my clients, and we identify what they're wanting, what the other person is wanting, and then we go through line by line, assess a value for that asset or liability. And at the end of the day, the numbers will pop out at the bottom of my Excel spreadsheet, and we can talk about whether there needs to be an equalizing payment made between the parties. But it's a really good way to ensure that you're properly identifying, valuing, and distributing those assets and liabilities.
It's interesting how, even though it's different states, very similar. Here in Georgia, we just have different verbiage for it, but we pretty much do the same. We want to make sure that we know what the marital assets and debts are. Again, like Presley, we all create our marital balance spreadsheet so that we can put everything in one place. And some clients do want to kind of deal with, apples to apples. So, we might be in a situation to where we are, dividing bank accounts equally, or, we're dividing the retirement accounts equally. We're dividing the value of the personal property equally. Some clients don't necessarily want to do it that way. Some clients might be more willing to say, well, she can keep the equity in the house. I just want to keep my retirement, because, some people don't want to start over with their retirement. So really, at the end of the day, like Presley said, it's really kind of going through the marital asset and debt spreadsheet with your client, kind of line by line, to figure out, okay, what is their ultimate goal that we are trying to achieve, and how can we do that, and how do we play with the numbers to ultimately get our client where they want to be.
Yeah, those are all really good tips to keep in mind, no matter what jurisdiction you're in. But yeah, I think, for what we just spoke about right now, custody and divorce, let's also keep in mind that all of our discussion here, applies to many of the cases that we've seen. We're talking about a celebrity divorce as an example, as a starting point. But I think, whether you're talking about seeking joint custody, offsetting and sizing up the marital estate to go for, let's say, a retirement account, that's fairly common in our. We see that all the time. And you don't need a big marital estate. Or when you're talking about custody, one person's child is just as important to a potential client as it is to some celebrity who, we see on the screen and we're never going to meet. But these clients that come into our office, we see them every day or every other day. And that's why it's important to understand that, what we're talking about here can apply across the board. That being said, I think one last item to touch on, it's still fairly common in what we see out there in divorces. But it's not as frequent, but still something I think that is valuable to touch on, and that is a prenuptial agreement. So in this instance, with Witherspoon and her former husband, they had a prenuptial agreement. Like I said a few moments ago, that's not typically the norm, but if you do look at different surveys nationwide, more and more people are engaging in prenuptial agreements, or even after they immediately get married, where divorce is not even on the horizon, they're going to do what's called a postnuptial agreement. That, they didn't get to it in time leading up to the marriage ceremony to get an agreement done, but they still want to have some type of contract in place that will give them both peace of mind, reduce litigation down the road, and help have smoother sailing in the event that there is a divorce. So whether you're talking about a prenuptial agreement or an amicable postnuptial agreement, sometime shortly after the marriage is consummated, you do see more of these coming across the country. So, that's certainly something that Cordell Cordell can help anybody with. That is part of our wheelhouse in doing pre or postnuptial agreements. But I want to talk about, maybe some of the to the panel here some of the benefits of entering into a nuptial agreement. What do you all see as, especially with your casework, why is it beneficial to have such an agreement in place?
Well, I think it definitely gives you an opportunity to define certain terms according to your specific situation. For example, without a prenup, under the law, the presumption is that anything earned or acquired during the marriage is marital. So that's what you would be dealing with if, God forbid, you're dealing with a divorce without a prenup. But if you do get a prenup or a postnup, that gives you the ability to define, okay, well, any income that I earn after we get married is going to remain my separate property, or any property that is acquired in my name alone is going to remain my separate property. So it gives you and your future spouse or current spouse, depending on whether we're dealing with a pre or a post. It just gives you the ability to have some control over dividing, your assets and debts in the event of a divorce. In Georgia, the only thing that a prenup or postnup can't address is custody, though. That's always within the purview of the judge.
Presley, how about your thoughts on prenuptial, postnuptial agreements from your experience?
Mine are very similar to Deanna's. I think that they really help when it's time for parties to go through a dissolution of marriage. It's already clearly defined and outlined. We know what we're doing. And I think another thing to touch on too is it kind of takes the additional emotional component out of it. Obviously dissolution of marriage can be sad and they can be heartbreaking and really, difficult to go through. But when you already have those things defined, there's less fighting overall, and it's very clean and clear cut. As long as the postnup or prenuptial agreement is clearly drafted and well defined with the rights and obligations of both parties.
And to piggyback on what Presley said, I think a lot of times we see our clients coming in, you're dealing with a divorce, an emotional issue anyway, but I think there is this also this layer of, you're scared. You don't know what your future is going to look like. Whereas if you have a prenup or a postnup, pretty much that's already been decided, assuming that it is a properly drafted prenup and is subsequently enforceable.
Some fantastic insight there. Panel, I think I'm going to leave it here on that high note. So first, I'd like to thank Deanna Potter from Georgia and also our other panelist, Presley Lee from Florida. It was great having you all. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And I'd like to thank our audience out there for joining us today, whether you're watching us live right now or you're watching us as a recorded episode. I want to remind you nonetheless to make sure to visit CordellCordell.com to check out all the information about our law firm, where our offices are, the type of services that we offer. We touched on a few today: custody, divorce, prenups. We certainly have much more on that you can find out, again, at CordellCordell.com, where you can always call us at 1-866-DADS-LAW, DADSLAW. And while you're there, whether it's on the website or in calling that number, you can always schedule an initial consultation, virtually, phone, in person, at a particular office, if that applies to you. Also, be sure to check out our social media pages and our Men's Divorce podcast. We have our social media on X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and where major podcasts are disseminated. So again, thank you everybody for attending our live monthly podcast this evening. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.